Welcome everyone to Magic with Class. I'm Jeremy Class. Today we will be going over the weekend Commander Legends spoilers. Usually the spoilers are a little slower on the weekends, not as many cards get spoiled, but since I didn't upload a video spoiling some of the cards from yesterday, I decided to go over the cards from both yesterday and some of the cards that were spoiled today. So right now I'm on magicspoiler.com looking at the cards. I left off around here. We talked about Gen Arcanum Weaver in another video. So I will be starting with this guy right here. It's Nostro, Voice of the Craigs. So for one of anything, one blue, one red, and one white, you get a 3/3 legendary chimera. So it can be a commander. And he has a tap ability. You choose one. X is equal to the number of spells you cast this turn. So you have three choices. You can scry X, you can have this creature deal X damage to target creature, or you can gain X life points. So the first thing I thought when I saw this card spoiled was, okay, this is a commander made for Storm decks. The fact that this has a tap ability makes him a little slow in those style of decks that usually try to go off with one big turn and win the game during that turn. And when you read through the effects, you'll notice that he does not have a win condition associated with Storm. So you can cast 100 spells and use his tap ability and still not win the game. It will allow you to scry X, which can set you up for a game-winning turn next turn, perhaps. It can get rid of the biggest threat on the battlefield because it can deal X damage to target creature. And I really like the fact that this can only deal damage to target creature. If it could deal damage to target player, then you can go off with your Storm and use him as the win condition, which I'm sure they did not want, even though it is a tap ability, so it's slow, and you're kind of telegraphing to your opponent that you're going to try to go off using Storm cards most likely. The last ability, which gains you X life points, can be used as a great buffer. If you feel like you need a turn or two more, and you are able to cast a ton of spells, then you can gain a ton of life points and hopefully survive until a future turn where you can win the game with your Storm cards. So overall, I like this card quite a bit. I do think there are better commanders though in this color combination. And I don't know if it really needs white, but if you have a Storm deck and the commander you're using is purely for the colors, then I think you can do worse than including this guy as your commander in such deck. The next card that I want to go over is Soulfire Eruption. For 9 mana, 6 of anything, and 3 red for a total of 9. You get a sorcery, which is rather expensive. This is actually also a mythic rare. So what does this card do? You choose any number of target creatures, planeswalkers, and or players of your choice. That can include all of your opponents, and it can also include yourself, but you're probably not going to want to use this card to target your own creatures or planeswalkers, because what it does is for each of those choices, you can exile the top card of your library, and then this card will deal damage to the permanent or to the player equal to the converted mana cost of that card. So basically, you have one opponent, they have 3 creatures, you choose your opponent's 3 creatures, and you choose your opponent, and then for each you reveal the top card of your deck, and then it's going to deal damage to those creatures equal to the one revealed card, and also to each creature and to the player. You can also play the exile cards until the end of your next turn, so whatever you're revealing, whatever you're exiling, is not going to go away. You will have a chance either on this turn, probably unlikely because you just spent 9 mana to cast a sorcery, but on your next turn, you will be able to cast the cards that you exiled using this effect. I think this card is underpowered. 9 is a lot, and this will not outright win you the game. You need to know what's on the top of your library as well, and you need to have a deck that is running high cost converted mana cost cards. It is nice that you get to cast the cards. They don't just get exiled and you lose them. it's kind of a cool effect that you will be able to cast those cards in a future turn, the next turn, or if you have leftover mana, you can cast it during the turn you play Soulfire Eruption, although that's unlikely, as I said. This is probably going to be the bulk mythic of the set. There's usually one very expensive red card, usually at rare, mythic rare, that while flashy, cool, and maybe interesting, just isn't competitive. I don't see many decks running to play this card. I think this will probably be considered the worst mythic of the set, and I think this is going to be just considered bulk. Maybe in a deck that focuses on, I don't know, sorceries, maybe in a blue-red deck that wants to cast very expensive sorceries, it might have a place. If you can cast it for free as well, it's also decent. So maybe in like a Narset build, perhaps. But I don't know how many decks are going to include that card over like a Time Walk effect or something like that. So the next card is Armix, Filigree, Thrasher. For 3 mana, 2 of anything, and 1 black, you get a 3/2 legendary artifact creature, and it's a golem. Golems in this set are getting a bit of a boost. There are a bunch of golem cards that can be used in like a golem tribal deck. This one I don't think really works in that tribal deck, but it's a decent golem. It also has partner, so you can partner it with something as well. So when this guy attacks, you discard a card. Not off to the best start, but when you do, target creature defending player control gets -X/-X, where X is the number of artifacts you control, plus the number of artifacts in your graveyard. So this is decent removal, especially if you're able to get a bunch of artifacts either into your graveyard or into the battlefield. I should also note that black in certain sets and certain blocks does have a theme of getting a bunch of artifacts into the graveyard. I believe the Esper Shard in Alara, the black cards that in Esper actually focused on getting artifacts into the graveyard and using them as resources. So, maybe in some sort of Esper build, you can partner him, so you can go black, white, blue with this guy. Maybe it could be decent. It gets around indestructible, so that's always pretty good. And you can discard an artifact with its own effect to power up the effect. So overall, this is only an uncommon, and I don't think it's the greatest. If this allowed you to deal X damage to any target, including your opponent's life total, equal to the number of artifacts you control in your graveyard, I think it would be a little better. As it stands, I think I would probably pass on this card. Next one is just a common. It is an artifact creature for 5 mana. It's a 2/5 with vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield, you just become the monarch. I think there are very efficient ways to become the monarch in this set. I don't think you really need this card. Maybe in limited though, if you're building some sort of I am the monarch limited theme, then this is a common, so you might as well throw it in there. And the 5 toughness means it blocks pretty well. And the vigilance makes sure that you can sneak through some damage and still be able to block. The vigilance is also important because you want to have a good blocker so that no one steals the monarchy from you. But this is for limited. Next card, and I actually really love this card, and it goes really well with the commander we'll be talking about next. This is Armored Sky Hunter. For 4 mana, 3 of anything and 1 white, you get a 3/3 Cat Knight. It is not a legendary creature, so you can't use it as your commander, but it does have flying. So when it attacks, and it has flying, so hopefully it will be able to get through, you look at the top 6 cards of your library, and you can put an aura or an equipment card from among them onto the battlefield. If it's an equipment that you choose, you can attach the equipment right away. You do put the rest of the cards that you revealed on the bottom of your library in a random order, and then. But overall, this is excellent in equipment and or aura decks, or even Voltron type decks. It's a cat knight, and there are cat cards that do appreciate equipments. There was a commander deck release that had a cat focus, and that also had a equipment sub theme. So I do like that. It's also a knight for tribal synergies focused on knights. Knights also do use equipment. Sir Gwyn is a good example of a knight legendary creature that does use equipment that this would slide right into. I love this effect because it allows you pretty much every turn that this card is capable of attacking. It allows you to search for an equipment or an aura off the top 6. If you build your deck correctly, you will almost always be able to find an equipment or an aura. I keep saying equipment because I think this will be used more in a deck focused on equipment, but I should not underestimate its ability to search for an aura as well. There are some very powerful auras, including Eldrazi Conscription, which is an amazing aura to play in a deck focused on these types of cards. I will say that there are just too many cards in this set, though, that allow you to choose between an aura and equipment. I've said before that I would prefer cards that, call out one or the other so you can differentiate and diversify decks a little. So pretty much at this point, I feel like there are enough cards that call on auras and equipments that you can just jam the best auras and equipments in a deck without really deciding if you want an equipment theme or an aura theme. Now it's pretty much an and or type theme. This makes artifacts and enchantments a little murkier in terms of their differences. But overall, an amazing card, very powerful. This is almost like white card draw in a way as well. It's certainly white card advantage. And the next card we're talking about is Arden, Intrepid Archaeologist. And before I even talk about this card at all, I have to say this is one of my favorite cards in the set. I know I keep saying that, and as more and more cards get spoiled, I'm probably going to keep saying that. This is only an uncommon, which makes me like it though even more, because this is an awesome and very powerful uncommon legendary creature, and it also has partner, increasing its overall power level. I think honestly this card didn't even need partner, but I'm glad it does have partner, so I can add a color to it, probably red. So this is a legendary creature, a core scout, probably from Zendikar. I think I see Hedrons in the art. So what does this do? It's just a 2/2, but at the beginning of combat on your turn, you can attach any number of auras and equipment you control to target permanent or player. And again, it does have partner, so you can partner it with maybe a red creature, because red usually also has a theme surrounding equipment as well. I really think that the best partner for this guy right now would be that 0-mana Kobold. It's just a 0/1, but it does have 3 keyword abilities, meaning that it can carry both auras and equipments very well. And this guy can get those equipments or auras onto that Kobold very, very quickly. It can also get the auras or the equipment onto itself or onto any other creature you may have on the battlefield. And the fact that you can get around those equipment costs makes this card very powerful. There's that hammer equipment that just costs 1 to cast, but it has like a tremendous equip cost. I think it's like 8, and it gives like +10/+10, and the creature loses flying. And that would be like the first card I put in a deck surrounding this. It's actually an amazing card. I am going to do an equipment-based deck using this guy, probably partnering it with red. And the card I just went over can be used very well, very effectively with this card as well. So what's next? Another very interesting legendary creature, although I don't know where this legendary creature is from. Tarkir, maybe? I have no idea. So it's Abeka, Brute Chronologist. A chronologist is someone who studies or manipulates time, and I think when you read the effect, when I go over the effect, you will agree that that's exactly what this card does. So for 1 of anything, 1 blue, 1 black, and 1 red, you get a 3/4 legendary Ogre Wizard. It does not have partner. None of the multicolor legendary creatures in this set do have partner, but this has a tap ability. So the player whose turn it is may end the turn. So this is a may ability, so you can't just use this on an opponent's turn and force them to end their turn. There may be a way for you to do that, but usually you will not be able to. So I think this is much more going to be used to end your own turn. So what cards can you use in these colors, Grixis colors, where you would actually want to end your turn? So red has a bunch of extra turn spells that normally don't see a lot of play, because although they allow you to take an extra turn, they usually have the effect that you lose at the end of that extra turn. So with the you lose trigger on the stack, you can use this legendary creature's tap ability to exile that trigger from the stack, meaning you would not lose from casting those cheap 2 mana take an extra turn red cards. There's also a number of black cards where you lose the game as well. So again, with those triggers on the stack, you can use her ability and you can end the turn, and instead of losing, you don't lose. So there's actually an artifact that has this same effect called Sundial of the Infinite. That's actually a very strong card, a very combo-ish card that people use in Commander, and now you can have that effect in your command zone. I actually really like it. I especially like that she is an ogre wizard. That's an odd creature type combination. There are going to be so many ways to take advantage of this effect, and I can't wait to see what people do with this card. Very interesting legendary creature. This one isn't powerful in a brute force kind of way. It really wants you to think about what cards would most benefit from this effect. So next one, Wrong Turn, funny name, for 3 mana, 2 of anything and 1 blue. It's an instant. It's a rare as well. And target opponent gains control of target creature. So this is a donate effect, limited just to creatures. You can give one of your creatures to one of your opponents. There could be reasons why you want to do that. Maybe the creature that you're donating has a negative effect, and you want your opponent to have that negative effect and not you. But this can also switch control of creatures between 2 different opponents. So if you're playing a 4-player game and you have 2 opponents, you can switch. You can take one of your opponent's creatures and give it to your other opponent. So maybe there's a player that's really losing the game, and there's another opponent that's very dominant. You can take the best creature from the dominant opponent and give it to the weakest opponent, and that's kind of like a feel-good moment. I also, again, really like the name Wrong Turn. It's like the creature took a wrong turn, it didn't know where it was going, and it ended up somewhere it probably should not have been. Very interesting effect, and also I think Zedru could use this card as well. Next card is a reprint. Quambaj Witches. The art is new, and I have to say, the art looks spectacular, and the flavor text kind of explains the art. It says all things are connected, light to dark, age to youth, blood to blood, and it shows a older woman and a younger woman. Shows a woman bathed in light, kind of, and then another woman bathed in darkness, and both of them are mutually going to stab the other with a knife, it appears. So flavor text makes sense. So what you get for 2 black mana, you get a 1/3, and it has a tap ability. The Witches deals 1 damage to any target, and then 1 damage to any target of an opponent's choice. So usually how I've seen this card used is there's a 2 toughness creature on the battlefield. You tap it, you deal 1 damage to that 2 toughness creature, and then you ask a different opponent to please target that creature for the other 1 damage to get it off the battlefield. That's how I've seen it used plenty of times. It's pretty cheap too, just 2 black mana. The creature type is human wizard. But since this is flavored as a witch, I think it kind of would have made more sense if they would have changed the creature type to human warlock. But I guess they didn't really want to update the creature types because that can be very confusing. That's just a reprint though. Next card is also a reprint, a more powerful reprint than the one we just saw. It's Blasphemous Act for a whopping 9 mana, 8 of anything and 1 red. It is a sorcery card, but don't worry. Many of you have seen this used in Commander, and you know it usually does not cost 9. So this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, both yours, your opponents, your allies. Just counts the number of creatures. So if there are 8 creatures on the battlefield, this will just cost 1 red, which is amazing. So what does this do? It deals 13 damage to every creature on the battlefield. It is indiscriminate. It does 13 damage to your creatures. It does 13 damage to your opponent's creatures, your allies' creatures. It does 13 damage to everything. So this is basically used as a board wipe, sometimes a 1 mana board wipe. But it can also be used in combos. So if you have a card like Stuffy Doll on the battlefield, which is indestructible, you deal 13 damage to that Stuffy Doll, and then that Stuffy Doll does 13 damage to an opponent, and you get to keep the Stuffy Doll because it's indestructible. So overall, one of the better board wipes in the entire game, especially in the Commander format, and I'm glad to see it getting a reprint here, because it's been inching up in prices. Next one is Court of Bounty. This is part of that the court cycle. So all the cards in this court cycle are enchantments, and they all have the same ability. When they enter the battlefield, you become the monarch. So there are plenty of ways to become the monarch in this set. So this costs 2 of anything and 2 green for a total of 4. As I said, you become the monarch as soon as you cast it. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So it's like a ramp effect. But since you actually have to have the land in your hand, it doesn't search lands from the deck. It's a little weaker, especially if you don't have a extra land in your hand, then this pretty much did nothing. But if you are the monarch during your upkeep, instead of just putting a land onto the battlefield from your hand, you may put any creature from your hand onto the battlefield. That's pretty good. So I have a mono green deck that uses just any card that allows you to cheat huge creatures into play, usually from the hand, but also from the deck. And this card will fit right in, because it does 2 things that I want that deck to do. First of all, it has the potential to draw you an extra card every turn, which is something that the deck wants to do. If I'm playing a whole bunch of cards out of my hand, I'm going to want to have a way to refresh my hand. So, Court of Bounty, pretty good. What is the best card in this cycle? Is Court of Bounty the best card out of this cycle? I don't think it is. I think the Black Court is probably the weakest one, and I kind of really like the White Court, because white doesn't have as many ways to draw, and the White Court allows you to both draw an extra card potentially every turn, but also lets you put those 4/4 angels, which are not nothing. 4/4 flying angels are pretty strong. They can close out the game very quickly. I also like the blue one for mill type strategies, but you'd have to have a specific deck to really take advantage of the blue one. Have they even showed the red one yet? I can't think of what the red one does. Maybe they haven't spoiled it yet, or maybe I just forgot. So, next card. This is a card that everyone was talking about too, in a good way, actually, finally. People were pretty positive about this card from what I've seen. It costs 10 mana, 8 of anything and 2 green. Apex Devastator is its name. It's a Chimera Hydra. Chimera is basically not a supported type, but Hydra has some support as green's iconic race. So it's a 10/10 for 10 in green, so, average, I would say. But that ability, this ability is just 4 words long, and Mark Rosewater said that there would be a card with just 4 words in the box, but the rules would take like over 50 words to explain, and I guess this one does. So what is in the text box? Well, it's just 1 word 4 times. Cascade, 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 cascade. So I have a friend who used to have a cascade deck. It was based around not Maelstrom Wanderer, but it was based on other version of Maelstrom Wanderer that cost 4 color. Here it is. So it's Yidris, Maelstrom Wielder. This guy costs 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, and 1 green. And when it deals combat damage to a player, if you cast spells from your hand this turn, they gain Cascade. So this is an amazing card to use in a cascade type deck. And basically, as soon as he saw this card revealed, spoiled, he immediately said, okay, I'm going to rebuild this deck, and this guy is going to go in it. So he did see a lot of the other cascade cards, which some of them are decent, but this one is just putting the cascade deck over the edge in terms of, at the very least, fun, I guess. This card just looks fun to play. You cascade 4 times. Hopefully, in a cascade deck, one of the cards that you hit off the cascade is also going to have cascade. If you get lucky, 2 of them or 3 of them are going to have cascade, and you can just keep cascading over and over and over. Very strong card, I believe. The 10 mana is what's going to hinder it. 10 mana is a lot to get to. But if you run this guy, Yidris Maelstrom Wielder, then you got to put Apex Devastator in that deck. Super fun card. So the next one, this is part of the familiar cycle. All these familiars are monocolor cards with partner, and they give some sort of benefit to your commander, especially, and I think they all just do it during your turn. So it's a 4/4 for 4, 3 of anything and 1 green. And what does it do? During your turn, commanders you control are indestructible, which would also include him because he would be one of your partner commanders. So decent. It is an uncommon. You don't actually have to use this as a commander. You could just put it in your deck and have 2 other partners as your commander, and then when you still play it, it would still get the effect. So I think this is actually better off maybe in your 99 than as a commander. I wish it just gave your commanders indestructible, though, at all times. Making it so that they're only indestructible during your turn is good if you're like trying to combo off or win it in that turn with your commanders, but your opponent can just wait till one of their turns to get rid of your commanders. So, ooh, sorry about that. Next card. Everyone said this is probably the most flavorful card in the entire Commander Legends set. This card is actually based on an uncard called what's it called? Well, I forgot, but it's Hans Eriksson for 2 of anything, 1 red and 1 green. You get a 1/4 legendary creature. He's a human scout, and whenever he attacks, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you put it onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking whoever you were attacking. Otherwise, the card goes into your hand, so it draws no matter what. But if you do put a creature card onto the battlefield using his effect, it will fight Hans Eriksson. So basically, I've seen people just say, in a Hans Eriksson deck, you want to have all your creatures just have 3 power or less, so that when it fights Hans Eriksson, it won't kill it, so you can use the effect every turn. I've seen some people say, the best way to build it is to use cards that make your commander indestructible, so that even if you are able to summon a 10/10, Hans Eriksson would not die because it is indestructible. So whatever way you decide to build this deck, and there are a number of ways, it seems like really interesting and fun. So basically in the story, Hans and Safi were, I guess exploring. He is a scout, so they were probably scouting. Safi sees a Luagoyf, which is a creature type that is exclusive to magic, I believe. And she yells at Hans to run because there's a Luagoyf that's going to try to eat them, I suppose. And it seems like Safi sacrifices herself so that Hans can get away. Safi also has a legendary card, but not in this set, not revealed as of yet. But she does have a legendary creature card. Hans never did. This is the first time he has gotten a legendary card. So basically, I think it's a major flavor win if you're able to summon a Luagoyf onto the battlefield with Hans Eriksson's effect. In fact, I think they should have added that if you put a Luagoyf onto the battlefield with this ability, you should just win the game because it's such a flavor win. They might as well have just put it on the actual card and said, you know what, if you're able to get a Luagoyf onto the battlefield using this effect, you just win. Game over. Go home. Everyone, you just won Magic for the day. So interesting card. People are loving the flavor based on this card. Next card, Root Weaver Druid. 3 mana, 2 of anything, 1 green for a 2/1. It's an elf druid, so you know it's probably going to have something to do with land or ramp. So when this guy enters, it's an ETB effect. Each opponent searches their library for up to 3 basic land cards. Up to 3, so it can be less. Especially if they don't have 3 basic lands left in the deck for whatever reason. They each put one of those cards onto the battlefield tapped under your control, and the rest onto the battlefield tapped under their control. So basically, in a one-on-one game, you're not going to want to use Root Weaver Druid. This does best in a 4-player game, because while this effectively allows each of your opponents to ramp 2, in a 4-player game, this will allow you to ramp up to 3. So basically, I don't really like this style of effect because you should never really want to give your opponents an advantage, even if you do get a slightly stronger advantage, because there are just better ramp options. If your opponent is not playing a deck based on ramp, you're basically just giving them free ramp. Also, I kind of don't like that even though they're just basic lands, I don't like that you get to basically take control of their lands, because you're going to forget most likely that you took lands off of their Root Weaver Druid, and I don't know how many times that I've finished a game and I took control of something from my opponent and then I accidentally shuffle it into my deck. So I guess they think that that's not going to be that big of an issue, because even if you do forget, the cards that you're stealing are just basic lands, so they're worth nothing. But I just don't really like that style of effect in general. Next card, Wild Celebrants, 5 mana for a 5/3. It's a satyr, so I think there's one tribal card that supports the satyr deck, but this would probably not be in it. So when this guy ETBs, you just destroy target artifact, and it's a 5/3 for 5, so just basically for limited. Plague Reaver, this is an interesting card. It is not legendary, so it can't be your commander, but it's a 6/5 for 3. So 6 power on a 3 mana creature always should turn heads a little and make you look at this card again. Everyone's going to expect a drawback, and this card does have one, kind of. So 2 of anything, 1 black gets you a beast. At the beginning of your end step, you sacrifice each other creature you control. So you want to play this guy onto an empty board. If you have no other creatures, his negative effect will not do anything to you. So right off the bat, that's very interesting because the rate is amazing on this card. You basically, when you have him on the battlefield, you can't really summon anything else. Maybe if the other thing you're summoning has haste and you want to get in for some quick damage. But at the end of the turn, you will sacrifice all other creatures. But maybe you're getting tired of just having a Plague Reaver on the battlefield. You want to get rid of him. This card itself has an effect that will allow you to get rid of it, although it's expensive, not in terms of mana, but in terms of the cost. So you discard 2 cards, you sacrifice this guy, and then you choose an opponent, and then during that opponent's upkeep, this card goes onto the battlefield on their side of the field. So in decks that want to give your opponent things, want to donate things to your opponent, maybe in that Rakdos Imp deck, this card could have a place. Discarding 2 cards, though, to give your opponent something is usually not recommended. But if your opponent is playing some token strategy, then this would be awesome, because at the end of their turn, if they have maybe 10 tokens on the battlefield, all of a sudden they won't. This will make them sacrifice all their tokens, and they'll be left with a 6/5, which is still pretty strong and maybe problematic, but hopefully you have a removal spell to get rid of Plague Reaver after he makes your opponent sacrifice all their creatures. Also, I should say that when this card is on the opponent's battlefield, they can use the effect to discard 2 cards and give it back to you, or give it to a different opponent. So, interesting. Interesting. This card can go back and forth all over the battlefield. Next card, this is an uncommon legendary creature, Tormod, the Desecrator. I really don't remember who Tormod is, but he is in the lore and in the story. He has a card that sees play, a 0 mana artifact, Tormod's Crypt. So he has never gotten a legendary creature, but It's the first time for everything, and here it is. So for 4 mana, 3 of anything and 1 black, you get a 4/2 legendary zombie wizard. It does have partner, so you can partner it with another color to give you access to 2 colors. Whenever one or more cards leaves your graveyard, just yours, you do get a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. But one thing I do not like about this effect is if you exile 5 cards from your own graveyard, you will not get 5 2/2 zombies. You will only ever get 1. So this encourages a deck that each turn can exile a card from your own graveyard. Scavenger Ooze is a green card that would do something like that. Of course, this is black, but if you partner it with a green legendary creature, then you could use that card in that deck. Overall, he is not the greatest. I would play him if its effect allowed you to put a 2/2 onto the battlefield for every card you exiled from your graveyard, but it does not do that for power level concerns, I'm sure, because there are just too many cards that can exile your entire graveyard. Okay, this is a reprint. Victimize. It costs 3 mana, 2 of anything and 1 black. This is a card you see a lot in reanimation strategies. It's a sorcery. It just costs 3. A lot of reanimation spells in the modern era cost 4 or 5 or more mana. So this one is a little cheaper. So you choose 2 target creatures in your graveyard, just yours, and then you sacrifice a creature, and then you return the 2 creatures you chose to the battlefield tapped. So basically, this also works very well in a sacrifice deck. You get rid of the creature on the battlefield that you don't want, and then the 2 best cards in your graveyard come back to the battlefield. Yes, they do enter tap though, so they can't attack during that turn in case you had something that was giving them haste or they naturally have haste. But overall, I think let me not say most, but I think some reanimation strategies, especially if they have a sacrifice strategy too, would want to use Victimize. This is just an uncommon. This Victimize has been reprinted before though. Next one is also a reprint, but this is only going to come in that etch foil that is mostly going to be in collector boosters. This is Derevi, Imperial Tactician. He is banned colors, green, white, blue. He just costs 3, 1 of each. And what you get a 2/3 flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, or a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you can tap or untap target permanent, which is decent, but I think people mostly play it for the other ability. So you can pay 1 of anything, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue to put this card onto the battlefield from the command zone. So basically this card gets around the commander tax. With this card, you never actually have to pay the commander tax. For 4 mana, and you can do this at instant speed, you can just get this guy from your command zone onto the battlefield at any time. This is a very popular commander. I think over recent years, though, it has been seeing less and less play as more powerful commanders do come out, but he's still decent. I think he deserves to be in this set as an edge foil reprint. He is very played. Next one is one of the partners from the 4-color commander decks. This is a Kiri Line Slinger. She got a legendary card, a different legendary card recently in Zendikar Rising, and that card really focused on equipment. This card does focus on equipment, but in a more subtle way. It's also a cheap partner commander, so if you're looking for a very low casting cost partner that can provide you with 2 colors, you can do much worse. This costs just 1 red and 1 white for a 0/3 legendary core soldier ally. It's also an ally and a soldier and a core. All 3 of those creature types are supported types. So for just 2 mana, you get First Strike and Vigilance, which is pretty good. And this girl also gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. And as I said, it does have partner. So basically, you probably do want to run it with equipment, but even your mana rocks will increase its power. I think out of all the 2-color partner cards released in the 4-color commander decks, was probably one of the weaker ones. But we've seen a lot of cards focused on equipment, especially in Commander Legends. but I don't know if this is the best card to use. It does have partners, so you can just partner with the mono white card that focuses on equipment that we went over a little earlier. Maybe. Next card, Thought Vessel. This is a 2-mana mana rock, 2-mana artifact ramp spell. So all the ramp spells that cost 2 or less mana should be looked at. As I've said before, the 3-mana mana rocks are starting to become too slow for a format that's becoming much quicker, especially with Jeweled Lotus entering the format in like a month. So Thought Vessel is 2 mana. It comes into play untapped, so that's awesome. And it allows you to just tap to add a colorless. So it doesn't add a colored of mana, but you do get an additional ability. You have no maximum hand size. Some decks really want to draw a ton of cards and they don't want to discard what they're drawing. Some decks can draw maybe 10 cards in a turn, and it's sometimes a shame to have to get rid of all those cards. So while you're ramping up, you might as well use something like Thought Vessel to keep all the cards that you want in your hand. Not really much to say. Most decks should probably use Thought Vessel, even just because it's a 2-mana card that allows you to ramp in any color of deck. That's a reprint. So is this one. Boros Charm. It costs just 1 red and 1 white. It was originally part of a huge cycle of charms. And out of all those charms, I think it's undeniable that this is the best one. And it's just an uncommon, which makes it even better. And it's an instant, so you get to choose one. This card deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker. So right away, 4 damage for just 2 mana is a really good rate, especially at instant speed. I see a lot of mono red decks splash white just to use Boros Charm. It's just that efficient. But even if you're not going to use it for the 4 damage at instant speed, it has 2 other amazing abilities. The second ability gives all your permanents indestructible. I don't know how many times someone cast Boros Charm, made all of their permanents indestructible, and then followed up with a Day of Judgment or a Wrath of God. Or, worse, I've had players use Boros Charm, and then follow it up with a mass land destruction card, so all of their lands were safe because their lands were indestructible, but it destroyed everyone else's lands. And that's kind of frowned upon in Commander, but I've definitely seen it happen before. And usually after that happens, everyone forfeits because it's no fun to play against someone that has 10 lands or even 5 or 6 lands while no one else at the table has lands. And the game's usually over at that point anyway. But it has a third ability, and that gives a target creature double strike. So again, I've seen this used to very quickly end a game. You're attacking, your opponent does the math, they realize they can survive, so they don't block or something, and then all of a sudden you use this card, give something double strike, and their combat math just gets thrown off, and you're able to steal a game with Boros Charm. I've seen so many times someone steal a game with Boros Charm using any one of its abilities. All 3 effects are equally good, in my opinion. If you're running a red and white deck, you probably want to include Boros Charm no matter what the strategy is in that deck. But you even want to run it in an equipment deck in red and white because Sunforger will allow you to get Boros Charm. Next card. So it's just called Ooze for now. I guess the name has not been properly translated. And in foreign languages, the name usually gets changed slightly from language to language. So what does this do? It's a 4-mana card. And it's a 0/0, which is very strange. And this actually has a Lord effect. I think this is the first Ooze that kind of gives a Lord ability. So oozes you control get +1/+1. So there were Ooze cards that support the tribe in general, but not like a standard Lord effect like this that just gives a static +1/+1. So it does include itself. It has to, because how else is it it going to survive as a 0/0. So that's kind of unusual because usually it'll say something like other oozes you control get +1/+1, but this one just says oozes you control get +1/+1, which does include itself. So it enters as a 1/1 for 4. At the beginning of your upkeep, though, if you control your commander, you can create a token that's a copy of this ooze. So basically, as long as you control your commander at the beginning of your upkeep, you're going to put another ooze onto the battlefield, and that's also going to give all of your oozes a static +1/+1. And that can happen turn after turn after turn, which is amazing because these things are just going to exponentially grow. Your commander probably should be an ooze as well to really benefit from this static effect. And we are going to see very soon a legendary ooze that will probably really want this card in the deck. This is a really interesting Lord effect. Usually Lord effects cost 2 or 3, but the power level on this ooze is really strong. You just have to make sure that you control your commander when you play this card and you're able to keep your commander onto the battlefield. I think the only thing that limits that card from being better is the fact that there just aren't that many oozes. But here's a new ooze for 6 mana, 5 of anything, and 1 green. You get this ooze. It enters the battlefield with 5 +1/+1 counters, so it's essentially entering as a 5/5. So whenever this guy or another creature with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on everything that already has a +1/+1 counter, and this card does have partner. So this is an ooze. You would definitely want to use the ooze lord with this guy, and maybe you want to partner it with something that can protect your ooze. So we went over the mono green familiar, which will give all commanders indestructible during your turn. This could work with that card, kind of, right? So you protect your commander by giving it indestructible, and then slowly you gain more and more ooze lords. This is interesting. I would probably play it in a deck where all the creatures enter with counters on it. There's something here. This is very interesting, especially as an uncommon. I wonder what I would partner with it. Maybe white. Maybe I would partner it with white because white gets a lot of +1/+1 counter support as well. So this is a card to look out for. It's a shame it costs 6 mana though. It should cost a little less. So now, Rakasha Debaser. Now, the Rakasha are from Tarkir. They're all demons. That's what Rakasha are. They're demons, but they're usually demons that are also flavored as cats. And as you see from the creature type line, it is a cat demon. Most cats are actually white or green. I don't think there are many black cats. Well, there is black cat, but a lot of the tribal support for cats are in white or green, so you probably are not going to put this in a tribal cat deck. So what does this do? It's a 6 mana 6/6. So when it attacks, you put target creature card from whoever you're attacking you put a creature card from their graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So this basically steals things out of your opponent's graveyards, but you have to attack that player in order to get that ability. It's a little slow. It's just a 6/6. It doesn't even have flying, which is unusual for a demon. But I don't think the Rakasha actually have wings, so I guess they wouldn't fly. So it's slow. You have to wait a whole turn unless you give it haste somehow, until you're able to attack with it. It's only a 6/6. There are bigger creatures in Commander, and it has no evasive abilities, so it might be hard to get through for damage multiple turns. But it doesn't actually have to deal damage, it just has to attack. So even if you can attack with it and it dies, you still get your opponent's best creature out of their graveyard, which could be enough. It also has Encore. So for 8 mana, 6 of anything and 2 black, for however many opponents you have, you can put a copy token of Rakasha Debaser onto the battlefield, and then it would gain haste. The copies would gain haste. So if you have 3 opponents, you can make 3 of these using the Encore ability. They'll have haste, so they'll all be able to attack. meaning you'll get the best card out of each of your opponent's graveyards for 8 mana. Is that good enough? Maybe in some sort of deck that self-mills, or maybe in a dredge style of deck, paying 8 to essentially get the best cards out of each opponent's graveyards is pretty good. But 8 mana is still a lot. And maybe sometimes all you need though is to cast a 6/6 for 6. Okay. Last card of the day. Nadia, Agent of Twilight. I have no idea who this is. It's a legendary creature. It's a elf warrior, so it's another one of those mono black elves. So every time a creature you control dies, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this guy. So, but for 6 mana and it starts out as a 3/3, quite a few creatures on your own side of the battlefield are going to have to die before this becomes a threat. It has no evasive abilities either, so it'll be hard to, your opponent can block it all day with just a 1/1. But I think it's eventually meant to die because when this guy leaves the battlefield, you get a number of 1/1s equal to its power. So if it leaves the battlefield when it was like a 10/10, you will get 10 1/1s. This also does have partner, so maybe if you want to make a token deck that also has a theme of sacrificing the tokens. I talked a bit about this before in a Tessa deck. This would offer you a lot of tokens that you can use to sacrifice, I guess. 6 mana is expensive though. I think this card needed to be cheaper and maybe start as a 1/1 instead of a 3/3 for this to see some sort of play. 6 mana is just too much for a 3/3. And yes, if your opponent gets rid of it right away, you do get 3 1/1s. But for 6 mana, I just don't think that is enough. Interesting though that this is a black elf. There aren't that many black elves. And I don't know, I don't think this one doesn't look like it's from Lauren. So maybe this is a character we're going to see more in the future. So those are the spoilers for today and yesterday. I just want to see if there were any other cards that I did not talk about from before. I believe I talked about War Room. If I didn't, I'll talk about it really quickly. War Room is a land. It enters untapped, so that's always something that you are going to look for because you don't want to lose tempo by having one of your lands enter the battlefield tapped. The less lands that you have that enter tapped, the better. So this can immediately tap for just 1 colorless. But for 3 mana and a tap, you pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's identity, and then you draw a card. So right away, War Room will see playing in every single colorless deck. If your commander has no color, then you will pay no life. And those types of decks are always looking for non-basic lands because the alternate is that what you run wastes, which, don't do much. So if you can run, 37, 38 non-basic lands that can generate colorless, come into play untapped, and also have a decent effect, then that's probably where you want to be. And this draws you a card. So basically, I think this was also made not really for colorless decks, although that's where this card is best. But it's also made for decks that just are 1 or 2 colors. So if you're running mono white or you're running mono red, you can afford to run a few lands that tap for colorless. So red and white struggle to draw, so you're going to probably want to use War Room. Even in a 2-color deck, I might try to find room for War Room, especially if that color combination is Boros, which again struggles to draw. I would probably play War Room in every single Boros deck. So the Vow Cycle, I think I talked about before. These are reprints. I think I talked about her as well. Very good commander, especially as an uncommon legendary commander. She does not have partner. None of the multicolored cards in this set, besides the etched foil ones, have partner. She's new, so she does not have partner, but she'll effectively double the number of tokens that you put onto the battlefield in any given turn. So that's always good. Did I talk about this card? No, I don't think I did, so let me talk about this card a little more. So everyone's calling this guy Dirtle Turtle because you're like dirtling around when you play this guy. A lot of people do not like its colors. It's Sultai, which is black, green, and blue. It also costs a colorless, so 4 in total. For a 2/4 legendary Turtle Shaman. So as long as this guy is tapped, everything, yours and your opponent's stuff, will come into the battlefield tapped. If it's untapped, everything will come into play untapped. So you can use this card with things like Freed from the Real, which will allow you to choose essentially when this guy is tapped and when this guy is untapped. Blue and green both have ways to untap your creatures, so this makes perfect sense in blue and green. A lot of people are asking where the black comes from because I don't know what black contributes in this deck. I really don't. A lot of people are saying that they probably would have preferred this card to be banned, for it to have white somewhere in its color identity. Because if it had white, you could use a whole bunch of white cards that stole out the game. Because I guess what people want to do is play a stacks deck or like some sort of pillow fort deck with this guy. This is actually a strong commander. I think this is going to be an annoying commander to face because all your stuff is probably going to enter the battlefield tapped when you're playing against this turtle. And you're going to see that your opponent is putting a whole bunch of things onto the battlefield untapped, especially like the bounce lands. That's actually a good example. This deck is probably going to run all the bounce lands in its colors and all of those powerful lands that usually people don't play because they're going to enter the battlefield tapped. But with this guy, that restriction is removed. Oh, and I know someone who really likes turtles, so I'm sure they're going to be making a commander deck focus on Lagoon Mystic pretty soon. But I think everyone should just call him Dirtle Turtle. Probably a much better name. I don't think I went over this character either. I think this character is from Tarkir. It looks like something that I would see out of the Tamir tribe in Tarkir. And the fact that she has, I think it's a she, the fact that she has a bear with her kind of lends itself to being from Tarkir, because bears were pretty popular in Tarkir. The Savage Punch, which was like a meme card. So she is just red and green though. She's one of anything, 1 red and 1 green for a total of 3 mana. She's a 2/2, a legendary human warrior. So she does get human and warrior tribal support. When she attacks, she gets +X/+X until end of the turn, where X is the greatest power among other creatures that you control. So basically, if you control a 5/5 and you attack with her, she becomes a 7/7. So overall, she could be very decent in just a beat down Gruul deck that just wants to summon high power creatures and just attack, attack, attack. She's also decent because she can actually win off of combat damage without even really needing equipment or auras or anything. You keep summoning powerful beat sticks, and if your opponent can't answer them, not only does your opponent have to face that powerful beat stick, but they also have to worry about this young lady attacking and then getting +10/+10 and then killing someone outright just by commander damage. So overall decent commander. I know another person who really likes red green a lot, and they just like to attack, attack, attack. So I'm sure in a deck focused on that, you could do a lot worse as a commander. She's cheap too, just 3 mana. Can you imagine if she was like 2 mana? So those are all the spoilers that I've seen this weekend. Once again, I will return tomorrow on Monday for the second week of Commander Legends spoilers. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for all the likes. Thanks for the subscribes. I do appreciate it. When Commander Legends does officially come out, I have pre-ordered some boxes, so I will be doing a box opening. I'm actually hoping to, obviously, I think most people are, I'm hoping to pull Jeweled Lotus. Jeweled Lotus right now is about $150 on pre-order, and people are actually pre-ordering it for that price. I wouldn't, personally. That's just too high for a single card, especially a single card that can only see play in one casual format. Can't see play really in Legacy or Vintage. So I'm hoping that I can pull one in one of the Commander Legends boxes that I pre-ordered. I pre-ordered a few because I really think that this set is going to be really interesting. I also pre-ordered them quite a while ago, so I got them for pretty cheap. Right now they're actually higher than they were even a few weeks ago. So I got pretty lucky. I think I made the right decision by pre-ordering them. This is just a set that really excites me, and some of the cards just make for some amazing commanders and interesting deck choices. So I am looking forward to this set quite a bit. So hopefully, so are you. So if I do pull a jeweled lotus, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sell it. Yes, I do think that jeweled lotus is a very powerful card. I do think that it should see play in a ton of decks, maybe even most decks. Certainly some decks benefit from it more than others. Urza decks benefit from it a tremendous amount. Joyra from Dominaria benefits from it quite a bit as a 0 mana artifact. Historic deck, any deck that focuses around legendary creatures would probably want to fit that card in there. But any that I get, I am going to sell right away because I don't think they're going to retain that huge, tremendous value. And what I'm going to do with any of the money that I make from selling jeweled lotuses is I'm simply going to buy another box of Commander Legends. And who knows, maybe I get lucky, crack another jeweled lotus in the box, and I'll sell that one as well. And I'll just keep doing that until I just don't crack a jeweled lotus anymore. But, you know, I'm going to most likely keep all the other cards that I get. I don't think I will sell anything else other than jeweled lotus. Hopefully, eventually the price will go down so that I can afford to buy a whole bunch of copies. But I'm not going to give in to the hype. So, this is Magic with Class. Always reminding you to gather with class. Good night, everyone.